Manchester, and to those of you in the surrounding towns, this is Girard at Large, and I am your ever humble, actually drinking caffeine this morning because I couldn't find any decaf host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Our time is 7:06. Our station is 90.7 FM WLMW. You can find us on the web at GirardAtLarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, also at Girard at Large. Oh, John is on. Excellent. Good morning, John.
Hi, Rich. How are you doing?
Terrific. And joining us now is Representative John Burt, currently representing the towns of Goffstown and Ware, running for re-election in Goffstown only, as Goffstown's officially a big boy town now. It has its own representatives. Except for it has to share one of them with Ware and Deering, and our good friend Mark Warden is running for that seat. So, John, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience, who you are, what you do what you do professionally, and why are you looking to go back into the cauldron of death again?
Well, that is true. People do want to know why I want to go up there for $100 a year. Well, I'm Representative John.
I thought it was $100 for the whole two-year term.
Oh, no. It's $100 a year.
Oh,
but our badge cost, I think it's $18. The license plates are $18. Time you get your business cards and everything else. Oh, they take Social Security out of it, so there isn't much left at the end.
I mean, they don't treat you all as an independent contractor and cut you a $100 check. They put you on a W-2.
$183 or something like that. I think that's what it was last time.
They put you as a W-2, so they take out Medicare and Social Security?
They do. I've been self-employed since 1990, and I have not received a W-2 ever since 1990, and I didn't want one. So I told them, I said, look, I can live without the $100, just give it back to the people. And they said, well, you'll still get the W-2. And I said, oh, all right, well, send me the $100.
Convert it into hot dogs. That's what we need.
Yes, yeah.
We're going to talk about that. So, John, let's talk about you now that we've got this foolishness out of the way.
Yeah. Well, I'm Representative John Burt, and I asked the voters for their vote on September 11th. September 11th is very important. The primary, because there is 8 of us running for 5 seats, and it's only the 5 that get through. There's going to be 3 of us that are going to go home, and I asked the voters, for me not to be one of them.
Okay, so I'm sorry, John, it's getting loud here at Radio Row, and I was adjusting my headsets. Go ahead.
Hey, John, I've been thinking, because I'm running as well over in Ward 2 in Manchester, and I was thinking about legislation that I might like to file in the coming legislative term. What are some of the thoughts you've been having about potential laws, or maybe the repeal of some potential laws that's on your mind for your legislative agenda going into the new term if you're fortunate enough to be reelected?
Well, I sit on the House Municipal and County Government Committee, and I love that committee. And the reason is because it's the closest to the people, I believe, one of the closest committees. My committee oversees laws that the towns are allowed to do. For example, one of them was the sprinkler bill. They were going to force sprinklers into every new home, but there was a little clause that they didn't tell us, that any remodeling, they can force sprinklers into your home. Could you imagine having an old home and being forced to put sprinklers in it?
Yeah, Representative Hawkins, I think, was talking about that yesterday as a bill that would pull back the fire marshal who was forcing the implementation of a fire prevention code.
It would kill the home remodeling business, too. I mean, it would just kill it.
Oh, it would. Well, every fire chief that sat in front of me, they did not like when my hand went up, because I asked them, every one of them, I said, do you, sir, and thank you for your service, I was always polite, do you, sir, have a sprinkler in your home? And they said no. Every one of them said no. And I said, then why?
That's not fair, Representative Burt. How dare you ask such a question?
Well, I said, why should you force us to have a sprinkler in our homes? And they didn't have an answer. But some of the bills I would like to bring forward is definitely an ethics bill. I'm working on it currently right now. So when I get reelected, this is one of the bills. New Hampshire is one of the worst states on ethics. It's extremely tight. We're not allowed to do anything, which is good to a point. But then we don't have a lot of disclosure, and I want to change that. I think the government should be very open to the public. Everything we do as a state representative or even a selectman or anything in the town capacity or state capacity should be in front of the voters. The other one is a campfire permit bill. I fought that bill last year and almost won it. That's how Hot Dog Day came out, and I'm going to be probably introducing something there to do away with campfire permits.
Campfire permits, you mean in cities and towns in general, and the need to have one?
Yep, yeah. In the back, if you want to bring your children or your grandchildren in the back of your yard and have just a small little campfire, you have to call the government and beg for a permit. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay, and how did
so
that? And what's this hot dog thing?
Well, what happened is when I got on the House floor to fight this bill, because it came in front of me from another state representative, I didn't realize. I hope the statute of limitations over, but I told every state representative, I said, now look, if you help me pass this bill, which was going to repeal the campfire permits process, I said, I will invite you to my house to have a campfire without a permit and to enjoy a delicious hot dog with me. Well, so what ended up happening, I was only I think it was 8 or 10 votes away from winning, so that was pretty close. And so what I did is I put on Hot Dog Day and invited everybody in the house, including staff. That was the biggest thing that I wanted out there. And we had over 500 people, including the governor and senators and everybody, and I hosted a Hot Dog Day up on the State House front lawn with 2 campfires. I did have permits for those campfires.
Now,
so
John,
we had a
you're
great
first
time.
Term, correct? John?
Yes,
You are in your first term, correct?
I am.
And you did something unusual for a freshman. You actually got a fairly major piece of legislation signed by the governor, and that was House Bill 582. Why don't you tell us about that bill and why you introduced it?
Well, what 582 does is it's relative to communications between employers and the employees.
Oh, and by the way, Girard Large time is 7:16. We are on the phone with Representative John Burt of Goffstown and Ware. He's running for re-election to the House from the town of Goffstown. It got its big boy pants, which means it's got its own representatives, doesn't need to share anymore. And John is talking to us about his record and what he'll do in the future. Sorry, John, I needed to throw that in there in case anyone tuned in.
No, I appreciate it, Rich. What 582 does is it's not for the employer and it's not against the unions. And both said that it was against the unions, and it was not. Or what the union said that. What this does is it's for the employees. During negotiations, which I did not realize this, but during negotiations in a union contract, the employer is not allowed to talk to the employees. Only the union is. So the employer says, hey, union, this is what I want to give to the employees. Well, if the union doesn't like it, they will go and tell the employees, look, this is a bad bill or a bad contract, don't vote for it, et cetera, et cetera. They might not give 100% of the information. If that happens today, or as of January 2013, since the governor signed this, the employer can go to the employees and say, whoa, the union misspoke. This is what I'm offering you. This is for the employees. This is a win-win. And I was real happy that the governor signed it, and he even saw the benefits in it.
Well, that's quite a feat to get something the governor the unions don't want to get the governor to sign. It
was. Yeah, I personally went and saw the governor, and I asked him, please, pass this through. This is a good bill, and I explained just like I did to you. This is not against the unions. This is not pro, business. This is knowledge to the employees. That's all the intent was here.
Now, John, you were also the prime sponsor of another bill that met with a different fate. It was House Bill 1305, also known as the poll tax bill. If you're reelected, first of all, I'd like you to explain what that bill is to our listeners, and if reelected, will you bring this bill back?
There is talk right now that I'm talking with the phone companies and some other people to bring it back, especially just to study how the telecommunications are taxed. And what this bill does is it basically is a new tax that the Democrats passed 2 years ago. The Republicans could have stopped it, and unfortunately they did not. So, who's at blame? Some say the Democrats. Well, I blame both parties for this, because it should have never passed.
Okay, John, I think it's important that people know exactly what this poll tax is. I'd like you to give some context for
Okay.
what problem were you trying to solve here?
What I was trying to solve is to keep the exemption on property on the poll tax, which is the telephone polls.
So right now, if your bill had passed, the local cities and towns would not be able to tax telephone poles.
That's right, because because there is the CST tax, so in a sense, and that's the communication service tax. So in a sense, they're being taxed twice, because the CST tax, the communication service tax, back in the early 90s, did away with the poll tax that the state was charging. And they said no more poll tax.
It did away with it and replaced it with the CST tax.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, the Democrats did something to eliminate the exemption. So now the cities and towns want to come in and levy that tax on the telephone poles.
They do, and they're doing it.
And they're doing it. Well, now, there was a fair amount of opposition from the cities and towns on this. How do you, as a state rep, reconcile that with the ability of cities and towns to raise their own revenues?
Well, I tell them to live within their means, and they're not. They're looking for any way they can raise taxes, quietly, and this is a quiet tax. And what this affects is businesses and the poor, and that's why I fought this. And plus, it's a new tax, and I said I would not pass a new tax. But,
so we can expect to hear something on this topic again from you. Well, but the cities and towns will turn around, John, and say, we've suffered a lot of downshifting. We've had to absorb a lot of expenses that the state pushed on us as it tried to fix its budget problems. So why shouldn't we be able to collect this tax?
Well, for one, it's a tax on poor and the businesses. So I think it's a wrong tax. If they're going to tax somebody, let's tax somebody that can afford it, but not the poor. And it's a kind of a hidden tax. People don't see it. But right now, on your Fairpoint bill, if you look, starting March of this year, you'll see a 99-cent municipal tax written on it. And we could have stopped it.
Interesting. All right, John, if people want to learn more about your campaign for re-election, you personally or anything else, how best do they do that?
Well, the best way is Burt NH, so it's BURTNH, like New Hampshire.com. And
it's
if they want to give me
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And if they want to give me a call, I'm always open, 289-0792, and that's in New Hampshire. And I also have a Facebook, John A. Burt. I'm open to anybody, so you don't have to friend me. You can just pop on and look at what I have on my page.
All right, John, thank you so much for being with us here this morning on Girard at Large and for the work you do in the legislature. We look forward to speaking to you in the near future.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thanks, Mike and Dave and everybody, and have a great time down there.
All right, that's
Thanks,
John. That's John Burt, representative of Goffstown in Ware, running for re-election in the town of Goffstown, which, as I've said many times, and I think it's funny, got its big boy pants. It's got its own representatives now. You can learn more about John at burtnh.com. That's B-U-R-T, burtnh.com. Girard at Large time is 7:24. Swinging. We're a bit distracted here. It's kind of funny because right around 7 o'clock, the noise level here, all of a sudden, actually it's more like 7:07, 7:08. You can tell that a whole bunch of morning shows go live because all of a sudden, how we start our top of the hour after Mike's done the news. Well, you hear a whole lot of that through here, and Radio Row is coming to life. Right across the way from us is Geraldo Rivera, and we are trying to flag him or someone who can get to him down. Maybe we can get Geraldo on the show. That'd be kind of interesting.
And also, we've got stations here from all over the country, so they're all starting at different times. Out in the Central Time Zone, it's just 6 o'clock in the morning now, so they're just getting or 6:30 in the morning, so they're just getting started themselves there. And yesterday, Rich and I were on KFQD morning show in Anchorage, Alaska.
That was a blast.
That was something. So we got to participate in that. They have their morning show set up right next to us here, talking to the guy running the show in the morning, Casey Reynolds, and he used to work with he used to work with Sarah Palin in Wasilla, Alaska.
Hey, Mike.
As a city administrator.
What's that station in Alaska?
KFQD.
I wonder if they could.
They're AM and FM station.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool.
And
talking to the folks in Alaska.
And
so
nice. we chatted afterwards. I will be in touch with Casey. We might do sort of a coast to coast kind of segment, every so often with him. And interesting guy. You guys think that I have some interesting language and know how to get under people's skin? I'm nothing compared to this guy. He was fantastic.
We just got to convince him to get up at 2:00 in the morning to be on the radio with us. That's the only thing. His time.
Oh, he said the bars don't close until then anyway.
Yeah, we'll catch him on the way home from the bar. So
and
that's the kind of guy he is.
we're going to go searching for their through their websites for podcast. So we could share that interview with you. And I also was on the Lisa Wexler show. She's out of Westchester County. This was the lady that I spoke to you of yesterday, who had the rather shocking statements. And I bumped into her yesterday. She's a perfectly pleasant lady. And actually, of all the people I've had a discussion with on the topic, she actually is one of the better ones. But so I said, it sounds like I said, listen, if you'd like to talk about this on your show, I'd be happy to do it. And she said, absolutely. And when I got there, she told me, well, I'll give you 15 minutes because I haven't even spoken to my own audience yet. She had an interview before me. And her producer was kicking us both off the air as they were heading into their top of the hour news. So we went the whole half hour. Great conversation. And we'll see if we can't get a link or the download of it, and we'll post it up on GirardAtLarge.com so you folks can hear Mike and I on Radio Row as guests for other shows. You did a stint too with our friends at Drop the Gloves Radio too.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Talked to Josh and Ron last night on their show. It was really cool, and they 5:30 to 6 o'clock segment, and I'm glad, very appreciative they had me on, and they wanted to kind of get a convention update, what was going on here. It was really fun.
Well, I'll tell you, last night we have a little bit of time before Ovid LaMontagne calls in, and last night I'll tell you one of the questions that Casey asked us is what's our sense of the convention here, and our sense of the convention here is that, at least mine is that you have a very determined group of people, a very focused group of people who I think, as you put it, Mike, have a confidence that they're going to win not only the election, but importantly, the arguments that are part of the election, and that the substance of the issues on everything from foreign policy to entitlement reform to budget and tax reform are fully in the view of the American people, and the American people have seen that things need dramatic change. And I thought one of the most important points last night was what Governor Christie had to say about the voters are adults, grow up, tell them what you need. They want to help, but they
want to be told the truth.
They want to be told the truth.
They deserve to be told the truth.
They deserve to be told the truth. They want to help, but they can't help if they don't know what they need to do, and that's where the whole truth-telling thing comes in. And I think that's very important for us to keep in mind. So I wasn't sure what to expect here, but one thing is for sure. I think the thing that turned this race inside the party in Romney's direction, the thing that put wind at his back, was the announcement, and that's my feeling from talking to people down here, the announcement that Paul Ryan would be the vice presidential choice.
That's the linchpin that the Romney hopes for being elected are riding on here.
Because not only did that say to the conservatives of the party, I hear you and I respect you. Here's one that you cannot question on this.
Right.
But it said to those of us like me who really care more about the issues in their resolution, their proper resolution, which is where the conservative philosophy or ideology comes in, that we are serious. We are going to take these on. I have 5 kids, and there isn't a day. I think of my standard of living now versus what I had growing up as a kid. And I in some ways it's better, in some ways it's not. And I worry materially about what will my kids, the oldest of which will be 13, 5 days after the election, what will they have to do to make their way in this world, and can they achieve as prior generations have achieved?
20 years from now, when this batch of the Girard children are adults, He said there's another batch coming, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, 10 years from now when this batch rebels, and 20 years from now when
you've
the
got
other
a brand
batch
new one.
Right,
so
right, and 20 years from now.
But when they're all out of the house and college students and all that, what kind of world are they going to be looking for their first job in and buying, getting married and buying a house and raising a family and all that? And it's, well, we don't have to tell our listeners something they don't already know. It's scary. It's scary right now. And looking down the road, as Chris Christie said, and he drew a very, very sharp contrast between, and he said, they believe and we believe. And he kept hitting that, saying they, meaning the Democrats, believe that we can just tell you what you need to hear. You can't basically you can't handle the truth, and we are going to tell you the truth. And he hammered on that, and that was some red meat for Republicans last night.
But you know what? And all this talk of the party that everyone needs to come to the middle and compromise is a bunch of bunk. The country needs clear choices for a clear direction, and those who are elected need to implement that direction. Draw at large time is 7:31. We're awaiting Ovid Lamontagne on the phone. This segment brought to us by Ken Hawkins. He's a state representative in Bedford. He has served the town for the last decade as a state representative. He's lived there since 1978, and he's running to represent the town as well as New Boston, Mount Vernon, Lyndeborough, and several other communities in headed west along Route 101. Or is that Route 9? I have no idea. To be their next state senator. Learn more at KenHawkinsForSenate.com. That's KenHawkinsForSenate.com. So our large time is 7:33. Joining us now on the phone is Ovid Lamontagne. He is a candidate for governor as a GOP primary on September 11th. And he's here to chat with us on Radio Row. Good morning, Ovid.
Hey, good morning, Rich. How are you doing this morning?
Unbelievable. Doing great. Getting better every day. How about you?
I'm doing well, too. Are you in Tampa right now?
We are in Tampa, Ovid.
Excellent. How's it going down there?
I'll tell you, it has been an experience. It's been a lot of fun just watching all the people roll through Radio Row and checking out the conventioneers, and it's quite a setup down here. There are 15,000 people from the media alone here, and we are the only New Hampshire radio show here. So 3 of the 15,000 are us.
Well, congratulations. I'm proud to be a sponsor and to help you do this, and it's great for New Hampshire that you're down there bringing us the experience and the events live as they happen, and continued good wishes for a great week.
Well, and we thank you for your sponsorship, Ovid.
Ovid, we've been looking at the goings on here at the convention, and the mood here in the Tampa Convention Center has been. We were just talking about that before you came on. There's this sense of this quiet confidence, sometimes not so quiet, that the Republicans have the answers in this election. They have a president who is in office right now who is eminently beatable, and that there is going to be a real sea change in the way the country is going forward. And to put it in very simple terms, a lot of them smell blood in the water. They think that President Obama is able to be beaten and beaten handily, and because they're going to win the battle of ideas. Do you see anything like that in your campaign in New Hampshire? Are you starting to get a sense that your message is getting through to the voters, that you're the guy for the future of New Hampshire?
Well, in fact, I am, and it's interesting that you relate that experience. I think in New Hampshire, the same thing is happening, not just for the presidency, but also for the governor's race. The themes are remarkably similar. We need leadership for a change in New Hampshire, in the Hampshire governor's office. We have not had leadership. We've had a good custodian, Governor Lynch, who's appeared, at floods and natural disasters and has been present for ribbon cuttings and so forth. But in terms of real leadership, we haven't had real leadership in the governor's office for the last 8 years. And in the presidency, Barack Obama has been a failure at leadership, absolute failure. And so it's not just an absence of leadership. He's been a failed leader, and we need a pro-business approach nationally and a pro-business approach in the state if we're going to jumpstart this economy, bring us into a new era of prosperity, get our government under control. And the themes really resonate in the grassroots level here in New Hampshire. And as I would say to you that as New Hampshire goes, so goes the presidency, and that means we need to have the strongest ticket up and down the ballot here in the general election. And I believe I am the candidate who can bring the message, reach across the aisle, and form a coalition of New Hampshire people who believe in small business, the power of the economy, and also believe in government reform to get government out of the way of the job creators. And that's a theme that we're talking about here in the state race, and one I know that Mitt Romney is talking about nationally.
Ovid, you have been criticized for your talk about reaching across the aisle and working with the other side to solve the problems of New Hampshire. And as we heard Governor Scott Walker last night, elections have consequences. Why not campaign as a Republican with a Republican agenda and work for Republican majorities, preserving the sizable Republican majorities you have in the House and the Senate, and then govern based on those Republican principles? If elections have benefits or consequences, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, why this talk of reach across the aisle?
Well, first of all, I am running as a Republican. I'm a conservative, Rich. I'm a Republican because I find my conservative values reflected in our Republican platform. I've been a past Republican platform committee chairman. I know this party. I've represented it. I've been a lifelong Republican. No interruption of service there. And I'm running for governor of New Hampshire, Rich. I'm not running for Speaker of the House or Senate President. I don't need to have the party label to organize myself or my staff, but I think the people of New Hampshire want to have a conservative leader who's able to work not just with Republicans or people in his own party, but also with Democrats and independents and libertarians and everybody across the aisle, across the board, I should say, not just across the aisle. And that's the kind of person I've been. People know me. They know I'm conservative, but they know I can work with them. If we have something we can agree on, then let's work together. And the fact that you and I might disagree on 8 issues doesn't mean on the 2 that we do agree, we shouldn't work together. And it's not about compromise either. It's about working where we can. And that's the message I'm bringing to this campaign. And I may be criticized for it. I have been criticized for a lot worse than offering to work with people. And if that's the best somebody can do, well, then we'll see what the voters think come the primary and also the general election.
Now, Ovid, early on in the campaign, you also received some criticism. I would even call it pushback from opponents who said that you were running for the wrong office, that you were too focused on things like Obamacare or trying to roll back federal intrusion into state government. And now it seems that at least one of those candidates has kind of followed you in the mold of, we want to push back against Washington. What do you, as a potential governor, want to see fundamentally change in the relationship between the state of New Hampshire in particular and the federal government? Where are those areas we are going to specifically look to root out federal government involvement in the state of New Hampshire?
The biggest threat to New Hampshire, Rich, is the federal government. I've said it consistently, not just in this election cycle, but throughout my political life, my public life. And I see it every day, and I see it in my business as a business lawyer, and in my own business as an owner of a law firm, one of the largest firms in the state. And I experience this through my clients. And the New Hampshire Bankers Association did a survey this past year. The results were published at the end of April. It's published on their website at New Hampshire Bankers Association, I think, .com. I'm not sure if it's the entire word, but it was done by Andrew Smith at UNH's Survey Center. The second most biggest barrier, if you will, to job creation is federal regulation, and to the extent the state mimics those federal regulations, the state also contributes to it. So it's a huge issue. Federal regulations, whether they're environmental regulations or labor regulations that are excessive and intrusive, are choking businesses. Healthcare reform, a Washington recipe, threatens New Hampshire's healthcare system. And so what I would say, for example, I'm using that as an example, is to say to the federal government, block grant those additional monies you purport to pay us to bring our uninsured population into Medicaid, which is not a system designed to cover individuals who are able-bodied people who can control their health care and so forth. And we should have a private approach, a New Hampshire-based approach for bringing more of those lives into being covered. And we should have block grant. We should have asked the federal government, actually demand that the federal government block grant that money to us so we can design the system here in New Hampshire. And I think we have the ability to actually craft a New Hampshire-based solution that will pass muster with anyone who's looking to see if we're sincere about doing this, and then change our own laws so that we have more competition here and push back on the federal government's micromanagement of our healthcare system through Medicaid in particular, and also to the extent the Medicare reimbursement system really interferes with our delivery system here. education, Rich, has got the same issues. And when I was chairman of the State Board of Education, I dealt with this all the time. Whether it was Goals 2000 that we fought, and in fact, our state was the only state to say no to Goals 2000 under my leadership. We didn't want more federal intrusion in the lives of our teachers and our families and schools. We wanted more freedom, and that's what I'm running on, both from the state perspective, but also given our relationship with the federal government. I believe in the 10th Amendment. I believe the 10th Amendment means what it says. Those powers not expressly delegated or are given to Washington, enumerated under the Constitution, are reserved to the states and the people. And we need strong governors across the board and across this state who are willing to stand up to the federal overreach, and I will.
Draw large time is 7:42. We're on the phone with Ovid LaMontagne. He's a candidate for governor in New Hampshire. He is running in the GOP primary, which is this September 11th, and we're talking issues with him. Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, Ovid, the legislature passed House Bill 1658. That's the law that requires all individuals signing up for public assistance or welfare assistance to have a comprehensive background check. And this came out, of course, in the controversy over people using EBT cards to buy cigarettes and things like that. That was in the news. Speaker Bill O'Brien said he's wanting to work with the HHS Commissioner Toompas to make sure that those vendors who sign up, there's an RFP right now, people to sign up to do the background checks, would also go after federal food stamp fraud. And his argument is New Hampshire taxpayers are New Hampshire taxpayers and federal taxpayers as well. But now, yesterday, federal officials came out and said they don't want to participate in that program, looking for fraud in the food stamp program because they don't have any guidelines and it's too new for them. That's the words they used. And just kind of keeping in what you were just discussing with your role in fighting federal intrusion. How would you, if you were governor right now, how would you address that issue? Basically, the federal government saying, "Well, we're not going to look for fraud in food stamps in New Hampshire." How would you attack that?
Well, first of all, it is a management issue and it's a leadership issue. And as the governor of the state, I'd be duty bound to discharge the laws of the state and actually taking an oath to uphold the United States Constitution as well as the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire. And in this regard, I would work with the speaker and legislative leaders to really overhaul, if you will, reform our welfare system to make sure, A, the people who are receiving benefits actually are New Hampshire citizens, they're alive. I mean, I supported a bill that would require an audit.
Dead ones collecting welfare, that's right.
And dead out-of-state ones, too.
Well, we don't audit our system as well as we should, and there was some legislation to improve that process, and I would do it by, management, too, without the need for legislation. And then we need to look at the benefits that are being paid and what are they. I mean, welfare is supposed to support, short-term support for citizens who need help to get food, clothing, shelter. It's not for the kind of things that we've seen people use these EBT cards to buy. And we need, I think, a more integrity in the welfare system and then help people get back to work. And one of the worst things that we did, in fact, is to extend unemployment benefits to 99 weeks. That's a federal program. And what it's done is it's discouraged people from getting into the workplace. And everywhere I go in the state, when I meet with business owners, they tell me the stories about people they know are qualified who decided not to accept a job. It might be actually a little bit of an entry-level job, more so than what they had before, because their 99 weeks is not up, and they're getting paid a little more. It's a little cushier to keep getting that benefit. We need people to be pulling the wagon, not in the wagon. So, across the board, we need welfare reform, I think, in the state and in this country.
I've had people tell me that too, Ovid. Question for you on education. Actually, kind of I want to tackle this category. Mayor Gatzis has been fighting the federal and to a degree the State Department of Education on this question of teaching, testing kids who don't speak English. The silence out of the corner office has been deafening. Mm-hmm. And education. We now, if now that the Obama campaign is out there, if Mitt Romney's elected, education is going to be the next thing that gets thrown on the ash heap of history. We're all going to be dumb. Let's draw off your experience as the chairman of the State Board of Education, Ovid. First of all, what will you do? And I'm going to ask the question that way because I want you on the spot. What will you do to help the city of Manchester with this enormous refugee challenge that it has and the problems that, frankly, it suffers with so many of its kids who don't speak English and can't pass the test because they can't read it?
Right. We should not be penalized because we have students here who are children of refugee families who are trying to find a way into America and become assimilated. It will take time for them to learn English sufficiently and to learn core skills. And I'd work with the mayor and the superintendent and the school district to receive whatever waivers we need from the federal government on this testing. Testing is fine if it's designed for the school district or the state, but when you have No Child Left Behind, a federal program, that's taking time away from the classroom for our teachers and our families to work with our students, to prepare them for the workforce, prepare them to be functioning members of our society. That's an intrusion that's not acceptable. No Child Left Behind was a Republican and a Democrat mistake, and we certainly see it now as it's being intruded or being used to intrude in our schools. We can do better on our own without the federal government telling us how to teach our kids. Since when did we give up on ourselves? Since when do we think Washington policymakers are smarter than we are when it comes to designing an educational system? So I really want to work with Mayor Gatzis here and Superintendent Brennan and whoever his successor is to make sure that we have the flexibility in this largest school district of our state to provide education services to our new immigrants and refugee families, but also to relieve us of the burden and the punishment that follows when some of the students who are taking these tests aren't ready to take the test. And that's just common sense. And that's what we need to bring to government, common sense. Right, Mike? You've seen it up close and personal.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Ovid, we often talk about New Hampshire being a local control state, but we all know the reality that New Hampshire is, in fact, a mother may-I state, and that the cities and towns may only do those things allowed by law, and if the law does not enable them, then they are prohibited by design from doing it. Staying with the education thought here, are there regulations, are there mandates on the cities and towns by the state that as governor you would work to either abolish or alter or otherwise empower the local communities to deal with things as they need to at a local level? Where are the areas that you would address there?
Well, there are a couple parts of that, but you're absolutely right. And a lot of people don't understand that New Hampshire is not a home rule state. It's a top-down state or a mother may-I state, which means that whatever authority a local community has, school district, city, or town, is by virtue of the delegation of that authority from the state to that city and town or school district. Political subdivisions of the state are creatures of the state itself. That's why I'm committed to fighting to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot to reverse the Claremont decision so that we can have true delegation of policy and funding to the local communities when it comes to education. That is a huge issue, and it's a huge barrier to what would happen next, which is to have true local control. And site-based management is where I'd like us to be as a state, where every public school is essentially like a charter school, where the principal is the president or the head of that school, the educational leader. You may have SAUs or regional backroom or back office support organizations that help with purchasing and the kinds of things that you can do in bulk, IT services and so forth. But the teaching, the education should be site-based, and we don't have that right now. We have an antiquated system that was designed after World War I, essentially, and we need to have again a more locally driven educational system in our state, which is why I support charter schools and I support alternative forms of education options, including homeschooling, because every child learns differently, and there's various ways of teaching children. And we ought to let families make that decision with their children and the local leadership that they have available. So it's a multifaceted approach, Rich. And the last thing I would say on this is we also need to make sure that the federal government funds its full commitment on special education. We've never had that happen. And yet we voluntarily participated in the IDEA, and the federal government promised us to pay 40 cents on the dollar, and they're paying 17 cents on the dollar. They've broken their promise to us as a state, and we ought to make a demand that they fully pay that share. And if they don't, we'll bring a lawsuit against them to force them to own up to that commitment under the IDEA law.
Ovid LaMontagne, how can people learn more about you and your candidacy for governor?
Well, people can go online at ovid2012.com. That's O-V-I-D-E. Don't forget the E at the end of the name, 2012.com. And stop by our campaign office at 1750 Elm Street at Suite 101. It's the Brady Sullivan Towers, and our number is 668-2012. We're within 2 weeks now of the primary. This is a very exciting time. Things are falling into place for us, and we're asking everyone to look at September 11th's primary date as an opportunity to show our patriotism, our solidarity, particularly on such a momentous day where citizens are looking for things to do that will mark the day as a day in which we remember the fallen heroes of September 11th, and we dedicate ourselves to what makes us strong and exceptional as a nation and as a state. And what better way to do it than to go out in huge numbers and vote? One of our most fundamental rights. Let's go out and vote and participate in the primaries, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Libertarian, wherever you are on the political spectrum. Take a ballot and vote on September 11th. And I ask for people's vote. I ask for their support. And then together we can go on and win in the general election and lead thereafter to make our state the best state to do business, the best state to raise a family, and the best state to live free or die. This is our motto. I'm so pleased to hear Kelly Ayotte invoke our motto yesterday on the floor of the Republican National Convention.
Indeed. Ovid Lamontagne, thank you for joining us here this morning on Girard at Large.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Rich. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. That segment was brought to us by, interestingly, Rick Parent. He's running for Congress in the 1st District, Republican challenging Frank Ginta. He believes that the Congress is not responding to the will of the people, believes that the Congress has ignored what the people said in the last election, and he believes that he can be a better voice because he is coming from where you're at. RickParent.us or RickParentForCongress.com to learn more. That's RickParentForCongress.com. Well, time is 7:54. This segment is being brought to us by Chuck Rolacek. He is running for the Executive Council in District 4, which includes most of the Manchester area, Manchester and its surrounding towns. You can learn exactly where the district is and exactly what Chuck Rolacek is promising to do if elected, exactly what an executive councilor does too, why his business experience, he says, matters in this race by visiting ChuckRolacekNH.com. That's Chuck Rolacek, ROLECEKNH.com. If you don't put the NH in there, you're going to get a bogus website that has nothing to do with Chuck or his campaign. Don't you love the bogus website?
Yeah.
The bogus website is always a joy out there. All right, that was Ovid Lamontagne. And that race is shaping up. It's an interesting race. And he mentioned, of course, our own Senator Kelly Ayotte, who was on the dais last night, speaking, introducing Jack Gilchrist of Hudson, who cut an ad for the Romney campaign. And as so many who have publicly supported Mitt Romney, suffered amazing harassment by the Obama forces, threatening phone calls, emails, letters. So troubling in some instances that they actually notified the police.
There's a lot of ugliness going on in New Hampshire politics this time around. We've had some those kinds of things. They're threatening phone calls. There is a rash of sign stealing going on all over the greater Manchester area. It's happening in Londonderry. It's happening in Bedford. Throughout Manchester, it's happening in Hooksett, and specifically targeted at Republicans, believe it or not.
Oh,
and they're getting their phone, and some of the Republicans are having trouble getting their mail out in a timely fashion when they're sending mailers out.
Yes, we heard that Senate candidate Phil Griazzo
and Speaker O'Brien.
Speaker O'Brien, Phil Griazzo, their mail pieces are being held for abnormally long periods of time prior to delivery by the post office.
Yeah.
Red tagged mail, which is what political mail is, while it is a bulk mail service, red tagging it basically gives it first class mail status.
Right.
And they are not allowed to hold that mail until they get around to it. And we need to be aware of this, and we need to understand that whether you're running for the state house to be a state representative or a senator or a governor or a county office or the president of the United States or Congress, there is a concerted effort up and down the ticket by those who oppose the Republicans the conservatives, the Tea Party types, the vested interests that know the game is probably over for them. Like it's over for the unions in Wisconsin.
Yes.
It's over for the unions in Wisconsin. And I think what Governor Walker in Wisconsin did sent a message around the country, what Governor Kasich in Ohio did, what Governor Scott in Florida is doing, what Governor Ding Dong up there in Michigan is doing. I say Ding Dong because he's trying to get the federal government to sign off on $2 billion to build a fourth bridge between Detroit and
Windsor, Ontario.
Yeah. When the three bridges that are already there have seen a 40% decline in traffic.
I imagine
there's no need for this bridge.
Want people in Detroit to just stay in Detroit.
Yeah, I would imagine that too.
We don't need another bridge.
But the Canadian government has said it'll give them a $550 million loan that they can use as a match to get federal funds to build this fourth bridge. Governor Rick Snyder.
So now we're getting a loan from a foreign country to build a bridge in our own country, that's kind of embarrassing. I would do it just on the principle that it's embarrassing. Not that we're not borrowing money from other countries to spend right now, but I mean,
for the state of Michigan to take on a loan from Canada to soak the federal government for $2 billion to build a bridge that they don't need. I'll tell you what. How about you spend some money fixing the three bridges that are there? Just a thought.
How about doing something other than destroying your own economy for the last 50 plus years? How about that?
I got an email with pictures of Hiroshima 67 years after the bomb and Detroit 67 years after the bomb. You'd never guess which one the bomb got dropped on by looking at the pictures. All right, we're coming into the top of the hour here. We have Station ID, the news with Mike Ball. Then we're back in the soup. Coming up next is your calls at 672-0573.
WLMW 90.7 FM.
It's uplifting and powerful, and it's a good message all around.
New Hampshire Family Radio.
Just a good station to listen to.